Good afternoon, guys. Today the video is going to be about rounding. I hope you had a good day at school. Follow along. Your notes should be practicing along with the numbers that I gave you. Just follow along with this technique. You may have learned different techniques from different teachers last year. This is the technique on rounding that I'm going to do in class. But if you have a technique that you have learned previously that is successful to you, then you keep going with it. But if you are unsure about rounding, then I'm going to say follow along with this technique. So, rounding. You use rounding when you see keywords like estimate and approximate. Approximate, that's a big word, but estimating and approximate, you may see those in a sentence or a word problem. Also use rounding when the question asks about how many. About is another keyword. And you want to check your answer and make sure you did the correct operation. It's a quick way to check when you may be doing a timed test, such as the STAR at the end of the year, if you need to check very quickly. Alright, so the steps for rounding in this technique are underlining the place value. It tells you to round to the nearest hundreds or tenths or millionths place. That's what you're going to underline, whichever place value it's telling you to round to. Circle the boss to the right, and we'll talk about what the boss actually is and why we call it the boss. So you're going to underline the place value, and the number immediately to the right is the boss. That's the number you're going to circle. If that number is 4 or less, we're going to let the underlined place value rest. If it's 5 or more, then we raise the score. Alright, so we're going to do a couple of examples to show how this works. Round this number to the nearest 10,000. And our 10,000 is going to be, we're going to first underline the place value. That is the 6th. 6 in that place is the 10,000. So obviously underline the number in the 10,000s place. Next step, circle the boss to the right. Now we call it the boss because it tells the 6 what to do. The boss is in charge of how the rounding takes place. So circle the number immediately to the right of the number that we're rounding to. The boss is in charge of what is going on here, whether we're rounding up or whether we are keeping everything in the same number. Now, if the boss is 4 or less, we're going to let it rest. That's why we call it the boss. The boss is what we use to determine if we were going up or staying the same. And since 8 is larger than 4, we're not going to let it rest. And since 8, if it's 5 or more, we raise the score. So we're going to add one more to the 6. After we add one more to the 6, the boss and all the numbers to the right become zeros. The boss has done his job, so he has worked himself out of a job, and he and everything to the right become zeros. So 368,971 rounded to the nearest 10,000 is 370,000. So let's do more examples. 35,327. We're going to round this to the nearest thousand. First step, underline the place value. Underline to the nearest thousand, so we need to make sure we underline the digit in the thousand place. That would be the 5. Next thing, circle the boss. The boss is to the right of the number we just underlined. That would be the 3 in this case. Next, we determine, is the boss 4 or less, in which case we let it rest. And since 3 is less than 4, we do not change the 5. Now, this may be confusing. Are you looking at the number that's in the place value, or are you looking at the boss? You need to remember that you are looking at the boss, the number that you circled. If it is 4 or less, then you're going to let it rest, and the boss is out of a job. He becomes a 0, and everything to the right becomes a 0, and you are done. So 4 or less, we let it rest. Change the boss and all the numbers to the right to a 0. So 35,327 rounded to the nearest thousand is 35,000. All right, we are going to work one with a decimal. Now, a decimal point is not a hidden sort of boundary which you cannot round past. It is, you can still round in front of and behind and around a decimal point. We talked about place value and decimals last week. You can still round around them. And we're going to do an example of that because we are going to round to the nearest dollar. All right, the dollar place for decimals in dollars is to the left of the decimal point here, so we underline the 5. The boss is the number to the immediate right of what we have underlined, and in this case we have an 8. So if we have a 4 or less, let it rest. Well, the 8 is greater than 4, so 5 or more raise the score. So we're going to add 1 to the 5. That becomes a 6, and everything else becomes a 0. So $5.87 rounded to the nearest dollar is $6. Okay. As you can see, there was no special rules for working around decimals. Okay, it's just a matter of what the boss does, what the place value is. So do not be hindered by the fact that there is a decimal point there. The rounding rules still apply whether or not there is a decimal. All right, so we're going to round this number to the nearest hundredths place, and I will be checking tomorrow. Okay, and if you have any questions, please jot them down at the end of your notes, and I will be happy to answer them in class tomorrow. I will be checking these. If you forgot your notes at home, feel free to watch the video again and take your own. I prefer you come back with something rather than nothing. Have a great evening.